Okay, so to continue our coverage over Captain America, we actually pick up after the Cold War storyline. Now remember, the Cold War storyline that came out earlier this year was a crossover between the two Captain America books that were following Sam Wilson and Steve Rogers as they both were Captain Americas for Marvel Comics. Now, at the end of Cold War, you had Marvel then cancel both of those books and then give us a brand new Captain America book that once again follows Steve Rogers, except this time it's being written by JMS. Now, JMS is a well-known writer. He worked on Spider-Man, he worked on Thor, and he also worked on Superman Earth 1, one of my favorite Superman series of all time. Either way, when it comes to JMS, he's taken over the Captain America writing duties. And with that being said, it's him trying to tell a different kind of story. Now, there are going to be some things you have seen before when it comes to a Captain America book, but at the same time, there's going to be new things when it comes to reading a Captain America book as well. And so getting into today's storyline, we're going to skip a few pages so that we are able to dive into the main plot for this story, where we actually pick up with Steve Rogers coming back home to his apartment building. Now, when he does, he's trying to talk to the property manager, but unfortunately, you have the manager tell Steve Rogers that he had just quit. Now, the reason why he did quit because the building had just been put up for sale, meaning that sooner or later, somebody's going to buy this apartment building, kick all the families out of the building, tear the place down, and try to use the plot of land for something else. Now, for Steve Rogers, this is a huge problem for two different reasons. The first is that there are other families who live in this building, and so if this building goes, they might have nowhere else to go. But also for Steve Rogers, this is where he grew up in, back in the 1920s and 30s, alongside with his mother and father. And so right now, he hates the idea that this building had just been put up for sale, and sooner or later, it could be sold off to somebody who wants to tear it down. Except he realized that he does have some friends in high places. What I mean by that is he was able to get some money from Tony Stark. And with that money, you have Steve Rogers buy out the building. And so now technically he is the owner of the building, which means all those different families who may have nowhere else to go now have a place to stay in once again. But now it's up to Steve to make sure this building can survive future events. For example, doing huge remodeling. And so you have Steve Rogers really trying to do some remodeling at the place. Now, while he is doing that, he is confronted by another person who lives in the building, and that would be Miss Rosen. Now, when it comes to Miss Rosen, she's your older lady, your older friendly lady. Now, with that being said, when it comes to Miss Rosen, she's kind of like talking to Steve. She brought him food, but then she realized that Steve was raised in this building back in the 1920s and the 1930s. But then she finds out that after his mom died, well, unfortunately, he had to move out. But she also kind of find out that when his mom died, he was just 14 years old. He didn't come our superhero Captain America until he was 18 years old. And so for 4 years, he was on his own trying to survive. And she couldn't believe that. But of course, we can, because we already knew, even back then, Steve Rogers never gave up. And so even though he had nowhere to live, nowhere to stay, well, at least he was still trying to make some money to hopefully buy a place for himself, but to also buy food for himself as well. Now, we do get this flashback where you have Steve Rogers be confronted by a gentleman known as Mr. Mueller. Now, when it comes to Mr. Mueller, he was somebody who was very close to Steve Rogers' father. Now, the thing was, when it comes to Marvel Comics, Steve's father died back in World War I. And so that is why this guy right here knows Steve's father so well. But on top of that, he knew Steve's mother as well. And this is kind of like a moment where you have Steve realize that his mom is gone. And because of that, he had lost a place that him and his mom had lived in for many months. Now, he was able to live there for 3 more months after her death, but of course, he had no money to pay the rent. And so, unfortunately, homeboy got kicked out. But for Mr. Mueller, he's kind of worried about Steve, but it's Steve saying, do not worry about me because I should be okay. I'm still going to survive. And that shows us that even back then, Steve Rogers had the motivation to keep pushing forward and never being stopped by anything at all, to be able to overcome any kind of obstacle put in front of him. But getting back over to the present day, we pick up with Steve Rogers just trying his best to do some remodeling in the actual building. Now, while trying to do that, this is where we see what JMS is trying to say about Steve Rogers. And what I mean by that is Steve Rogers is still a superhero. He is still Captain America. And so sometimes the world will be calling out for him to help out, like right now. Because while you have Steve Rogers just doing some remodeling, he is confronted by Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman, who's begging for his help with a certain bad guy. Now, the bad guy they're going to fight against is not important at all. It's basically only used as a way to say that Steve Rogers is most likely exhausted because in the morning and most likely the afternoon, he's remodeling his brand new apartment building. But at night or in the evening, he is a superhero fighting against different super villains. And so trying to balance both jobs is hard. It's basically taking a toll on him. And it really shows that the only thing he wants to do is just go home to his bed and sleep. But getting back in the past one more time, we do pick up with young Steve Rogers before he became Captain America, but right after his mother's death, working different kinds of odd jobs as a way to make some money to hopefully buy a place for himself to live in. Now the thing is, he has to do a lot of different kinds of jobs. But then he's in luck because one of his friends, Arnie, and matter of fact, Arnie is an old character in Marvel Comics that first appeared back in the 1980s. So if anybody out there believes it's a new character, he's not a new character at all. Either way, when it comes to Arnie, he was a close friend of Steve Rogers before he became Captain America. And this is Arnie telling Steve that he heard a guy is giving out a room to rent for 30 cents a month. Now the thing is, Steve Rogers has to make a down payment as well. And so that means that Steve has to work even harder to make some more money to pay the first month, but also make a down deposit as well. And so this is Steve Rogers just working even harder to hopefully be able to get that money. But getting back over to the present day, we see Steve Rogers go confront a young man. And the reason why, because in the earlier pages, after Steve Rogers had helped out the Fantastic Four, he had a fight against some random thugs and he almost was shot and killed from behind. But this guy right here that he is currently talking to was able to warn Steve before he got shot in the head. And so this is Steve trying to thank him for basically help save his life. And so for Steve, he's kind of like, how about this? You need a place to live and stay because you have an entire family that's currently living out of your car. Why not work for me, but you'll also have an apartment to live in as well? And this guy, he truly agrees to take on the deal. And we are told that his name is Mr. Kim. But then we get another flashback. Now with this flashback right here, we actually jump back 2 years ago, but we pick up in South America, where we pick up with two characters known as Travis Lane, the Caucasian character, and Castillo. Now, when it comes to Castillo, he's trying to lead Travis Lane over to a temple for a certain character known as Asmodee, and I really hope I pronounce his name correctly. Now, when it comes to Asmodee, he's technically new, but not new at the same time. What I mean by that is he was referenced in a Marvel zombie book as one of the many angels that try to help Lucifer rule over heaven. Now, of course, we all know that Lucifer failed, and anybody who helped him also failed as well. They were all punished, and we kind of find out they all became fallen angels And so when it comes to Asmodee, because he tried to help Lucifer, he was told to us to be a fallen angel. Now, this is his actual first appearance because he was only referenced, never actually seen. And so this is him coming to life in Marvel Comics finally, but apparently he is known as a Lord of Chaos. Now, we are not told what is a Lord of Chaos. The only thing we are told about Asmodee is that apparently he is Hell's Hammer. He basically kills off a huge wave of humans to kind of make sure the world is perfectly balanced, which means that he could be helping to make sure life and death is perfectly balanced. Either way, when it comes to Asmodee, when he is needed on Earth, what he does is he goes around possessing different people's bodies as a way to help him accomplish different goals or different missions that he is trying to handle. Now, apparently, we come to find out that Asmodee has been here the entire time because he had possessed the body of Castillo. And matter of fact, this entire time, our two characters have been inside the temple and Travis had no idea that he was. But once he realized that he was in the temple, you didn't have Asmodee leave Castillo's body and begin the process of trying to possess the body of Travis Lane to use him for a new reason. And that new reason is because something big is coming down the road. Now, 1 month later, we do pick up with a young lady known as Ariana Walters, who is being confronted by Travis Lane. We already know this is not Travis, this is just Asmodee using his body as a way to kind of begin the process of trying to accomplish his next goal. Now, when it comes to Ariana, she used to work for AIM, Advanced Idea Mechanics, until they were bought out by Sunspot from the X-Men. And so she was laid off, and ever since then, she's been on the run. Now, with that being said, is Travis saying, I need your help. And I need you to find other people who could possibly help me. And what he is trying to do is technically give the world an illusion of free will. But in reality, there will not be free will. He'll be in charge for thousands of years. That is what Asmodee wants, to kind of make sure the human race is under his control. Now, with all that being said, he tells Ariana that he has a plan to give this illusion to America, but also to the world, the idea that down the road there could be free will for everybody. But in reality, he'll have full control over the entire world. And once he is able to convince Ariana to help him out to achieve this game plan, in literally 5 minutes, she's down to help him to take over the world in one unique kind of way. Now, getting back over to Steve Rogers' past once again, and I want to say we're going to jump back to the year 1937. This is a huge moment for JMS. What I mean by that is he does a huge callback to America history. See, back around this time in America, you had a group of men who were marching around New York about the idea of America helping out the Nazis and trying to help them accomplish all their different goals. They were really trying to promote the idea of the two countries working together. And this is going to play a very important role for this storyline, because right now in Steve Rogers' past, you currently have a group of men who are trying to promote the idea of America and also the Nazis coming together to help accomplish the Nazis' goal. And for Steve Rogers, he cannot believe what his ears are currently hearing in the middle of this park. And so getting into the second chapter, we actually do pick up with the speaker of this group continuing to speak about the idea of Nazis and Americans working together to basically accomplish this goal. Now, with that being said, when it comes to this group, they're called the Great American Bund. But after you have the speaker speak for a few more minutes, you did have Steve Rogers confront the speaker to technically say this entire group is stupid and weird and wrong. There's no way that Americans are going to join this group to help this group accomplish the goals of the Nazis. Now, when it comes to the speaker and his fellow people, they're very upset about the idea of what Steve Rogers just said. Now, this is another example of Steve Rogers just never backing down. Because, guys, remember, this took place in 1937 before he became Captain America. And so he has no powers. But even back then, he still had motivation to stand up for people, to stand up for what is right. And so he knew what these guys were saying was basically wrong. And so they beat him down, but of course, he didn't back down. And so we do get a quick check-in on Asmodee. And remember, as we follow this character around, he is also in the past. Now, with that being said, you have Asmodee currently buying some kind of laboratory on a private island. And apparently inside this laboratory has a bunch of high-tech stuff that's up there with Stark Tech. And apparently this is going to help him accomplish his goal. Now, with all that being said, once he gets what he wants from the seller, he goes ahead and kills off the seller, and technically we move on with the story. And now we jump back over to Steve Rogers in the past once again, and we finally see him being able to get the apartment that he has been trying to save up for. The problem is, though, when it comes to the apartment, it's not an actual apartment. Matter of fact, it's only a supply closet. Yeah, you heard that right. But either way, for Steve Rogers, he's happy to get what he got, because now at least he has somewhere to live. Now, with all that being said, by the end of the storyline, he'll become the guy who just goes around and fixes everything else for everybody else in the apartment building. As a matter of fact, he does meet a young lady, and her name is Tiffany. And that's it. All we know is her first name is Tiffany, but they are going to become close friends. But getting back into the present day, we continue the idea of seeing Steve Rogers trying to remodel this entire apartment building, but now at least he has some work, Mr. Kim. Now, this is a great moment for me, and the reason why, because it really shows that no matter what, Steve Rogers is down with the idea of bonding with just regular people and trying to help regular people. He's been that guy his entire life. And so when it comes to him, Mr. Kim, they do bond as they're remodeling, but at the same time, it's Steve trying to learn more about Mr. Kim's past. And honestly, it's kind of nice to see that. Either way, once you have our two characters finish bonding, you have Spider-Man appear. Now, when Spider-Man does appear, this is really him asking Steve Rogers for help with a certain kind of problem. Now, of course, we're told there's some bad guys that him and Steve need to work together on when it comes to shut down the bad guys. And you have Steve Rogers agree to help out Spider-Man, but he's very upset by doing it. And the reason why? Because Steve was supposed to have a date tonight with Sharon Carter. Let's not forget, guys, that Steve Rogers is not a single man. He got a girlfriend. That is Sharon Carter. Either way, he's kind of like, man, the life of a superhero. Because even when you think you might have an off day, you're not going to have that off day. Because, again, you are a superhero. And so he does agree to help out Spider-Man, to only kind of find out that possibly Spider-Man got the wrong intel and the bad guys are not where they should be yet. And so Steve is very upset about the idea that he most likely just ruined date night for no good reason. But getting back over to our coverage over Asmodee, we do currently see a bunch of different scientists that used to work for Advanced Idea Mechanics AIM, currently working for him now. Now, when it comes to these scientists, you do have one of them getting very upset or very worried for the person they are working for. And the reason why, because every single time they're working on different kinds of information or different kinds of data, sometimes they'll find different kinds of demonic things. And it's one particular tech dude is kind of like, dude, I'm very worried and concerned for who we are working for. Like, I think I want to quit because this is crazy. And the thing is, though, right out of nowhere, it seems like he was just possessed. And the reason why I'm saying that, because out of nowhere, his entire mood changes, saying that he wants to get some coffee. He goes outside and he jumps off the balcony to his death. Literally just like that. And so whatever kind of material that he was looking at, well, it could have possessed him, or Asmodee did and told him, you know what, if you cannot work for me and get over the stuff that you're looking at, then you have to go, and basically died. But getting back to the past, once again, 1937, we actually pick up with two characters we have seen so many times in Marvel Comics. These are classic villains. That would be Baron von Strucker and Baron Heinrich Zemo. Now remember, when it comes to Marvel's timeline, Steve Rogers had fought against two characters who both hold the title Baron Zemo. This is the first one, the one Steve Rogers fought back in World War II. Now either way, you have the two Barons coming together and meeting up with another character known as Wolf. And you had the three characters coming together to talk about the idea of trying to find a way to get support from America. Because like we saw earlier with the Great American Bund, who are trying to convince Americans to help out the Nazis, so is this group of characters as well. They're trying to find a way to get support from America. And they realize they do actually have a way. And what they're going to do is create an enemy. And what they mean by that is they're going to find a particular group of people that they want to get rid of. That particular group of people are going to be dressed in a way like they are basically evil, that they are attacking Germany left and right, that they are more powerful than Germany and have the ability to get rid of Germany. And so with them trying to paint this illusion of that certain enemy, once they do all that right there, then possibly America would be down to help out Germany fight against their enemy. And the reason why they're doing it this way, because when it comes to America, they always help out the underdog. They always help out the weaker countries. And so it's these two characters saying, if we are able to paint the picture that Germany is weaker than our supposed enemy, America will most definitely help us out when it comes to accomplishing our goals, the Nazis' goals. And so with all that being said, they're wondering, how can they begin the process? And they said, why not do our first attack at Madison Square Garden? Now we do get this other moment where we pick up with Steve Rogers, who is currently trying to live in his brand new apartment, the one he had back in 1937. Now, while trying to live in this apartment he got now, he begins to hear somebody else being attacked by the group of the Great American Bund. And so hearing them trying to attack an innocent man, you have Steve Rogers once again being that guy to stand up for what is right. Now remember, this is him before he became Captain America. And so he has no powers, and these guys are way stronger than he is. But again, for Steve Rogers, he always stands up for the smaller people. And so you have Steve go out there and try to protect the guy. Now, Steve does get very lucky. And the reason why, because the other people who live in the apartment building have begun the process of falling in love. Not in love, but beginning to like Steve Rogers a lot. Like kind of one of their own. They have to protect each other because they all live in the same apartment building. And so they were able to help Steve Rogers get rid of the Great American Bund. But it also shows that Steve Rogers and Tiffany are kind of building that bond with one another. But then we pick up with Asmodee trying to recruit somebody else known as Henry Kavanagh. Now, this takes place about 6 weeks ago. Either way, when it comes to Henry, he is a well-trained killer. Now, with him being a well-trained killer, and matter of fact, having 14 dead bodies beneath his house, you have Asmodee trying to recruit Henry to be used as a way to kill off different people across the world. And the reason why? Because those different people are going to be nexus points. See, when it comes to Asmodee, he realized that every once in a while, when someone dies, a special kind person dies, their death brings hope into the world through different kinds of events. So, for example, World War I, World War II, Someone died as a way that led to a war to hopefully take out a group of bad guys to bring hope back into the world. And so the person who died to basically cause those two different wars were basically nexus points. And so when it comes to Asmodee, he wants to make sure they kill off future nexus points as a way to make sure there's no more hope being brought into the world. Because again, if those kind people die, they'll bring hope into the world. That is why they're known as nexus points. Now, with that being said, he says the next person whose death could most likely bring hope into the world is going to be Steve Rogers. Now, it's not really him saying that Steve Rogers is going to die, but the thing is, Steve Rogers is a huge nexus point, meaning that in some kind of way, he'll bring hope into the world. And when he does, it will make his job even harder when it comes to trying to rule over the world. And so getting into the third chapter, we pick up with Steve Rogers meeting up with Misty Knight. Now, the reason why, because Misty Knight has found a dead body that was burned in a unique kind of way. Now, the reason why I'm saying unique, because the entire body was burned into a pile of ash, but the rest of the room was not burnt at all. And on top of that, this is kind of like the ninth person to be killed off like this, but the first person in America to be killed off like this. Either way, she calls Steve Rogers to see if he has an idea what in the world is going on. Now, there is another reason why she called him here, but that'll be told to us at the end of their conversation. Either way, when Steve Rogers walks in, he sees all these different kinds of symbols. But while you have Misty Knight and Steve Rogers talking to each other, we kind of get this flashback. At the same time, our two heroes are having a conversation with one another, where we kind of find out the person was killed off by Henry. And let's not forget, Henry was hired by Asmodee to go around and kill off different people who could become nexus points. People who could bring a lot of hope in the world when they are killed off. And so his goal is to kill them all before they become a nexus point. And so this last victim was supposed to be somebody who could possibly bring hope into the world if they are killed off in some kind of way. Either way, Henry killed them all before that was actually able to happen. Now, here is the thing though, because you have Misty Knight call in Doctor Strange in a very unique kind of way, because she pulls out a figurine that looks just like Doctor Strange. Now, the reason why she has a Doctor Strange figurine is because if she ever needs the Doctor, he is able to send an astral form of himself inside the doll so that he is able to communicate if someone needs his help. And so when it comes to Misty Knight and Steve Rogers, they had his doll as a way to communicate with Doctor Strange. Now, as soon as he appears, he says, "These symbols are very demonic, but usually these symbols are used as a way to trap a demon. But at the same time, some of these symbols are actually used as a way to trap a human as well. This is very unique in its own kind of way." But we kind of find out that Henry has power. See, the way he killed off this person, it seems like he is able to burn you from the inside out. And so that is most likely how the rest of the room was not burned when it came to the body being turned to ash, because that person was burning from the inside out, not the outside in. Either way, after you have the person being killed off, their body is turned to ash, but a crystal comes out of the pile of the ash, and you have Henry collect all these different kinds of crystals. Now, we are not told what these crystals actually do, but the thing is, Henry's killing off all these different people, and once he does kill them off, he collects a crystal. But getting back over to Steve Rogers and Misty Knight, you have Misty Knight tell Steve Rogers another reason why he is called here, because one of the symbols that was drawn on the wall is his shield. And so that tells Steve Rogers and Misty Knight that most likely he could be a target for this killer who's going around killing off different people left and right. But going back in time once again, we pick up in the year 1938, where we pick up with Steve Rogers watching another speech being done by the Great American Bun. Now remember, they believe that Nazis and America should be working together as one, and they're trying to paint a picture that the Jewish people are actually bad people and they're more powerful than Germany. And so when it comes to America, Germany knows that America is always helping out the underdogs. And so with that being said, it's Germany saying, we're the underdogs. We need your help. Now, while you have the Great American Bun trying to get a speech out, you have Steve Rogers once again stand up against them, saying that what you guys are saying is completely wrong, that you guys are basically bullies. But the thing is, when it comes to the Great American Bun, they're trying to use Steve Rogers as an example of somebody who's not a true American, a true patriot. Now you have Steve Rogers walk away, but when he does, he is confronted by a gangster, and that would be Mayor Lansky. And he has a very important job for Steve Rogers that could help bring down the Great American Bun. Now, when it comes to Lansky, even though he is a gangster, he's trying to protect America. And what he is saying is that he knows what the Nazis are trying to do. That basically, when it comes to the Nazis, they're trying to paint a picture that the Jewish people are bad people that have to be stopped. But he also says they're not going to stop there. Even if they are able to get rid of us, they'll just find somebody else to go after next. And that will continue on over and over again until the rest of the world is in ashes and they are the only country left standing. That is their end goal there. And so he says, we have to bring them down. We have to stop the Great American Bun, because he got word that they are plotting to do something big in New York. And he's correct, because they are planning to attack Madison Square Garden. And he says, I got word about an operation named The Garden. I need you, Steve Rogers, to figure out what they are trying to do. Once you are able to figure out what they are doing, you and I are going to work together to hopefully shut them down before they hurt innocent people. Now, even though, like I said, Lansky is a gangster, it's Steve realizing that he has no choice here, that Lansky is trying to do something good for America, making sure the Nazis are not able to recruit any more people from America. And so he agrees to work with Lansky. But then we jump to a different point in time, where we actually pick up 6 weeks before the present day, where we pick up with Ariana, Henry, and also Trevor. Now remember, Trevor is currently being possessed by, of course, Asmodee. But the thing is, you had the 3 characters talking about the idea of Henry gaining powers. Now, when it comes to the powers that he'll be gaining, it's going to be a combination of science, but also magic as well. And with that kind of combination, he'll become a very strong opponent for anybody who tries to go up against him. Now, with all that being said, though, you did have Ariana and Henry say, you know what's funny? Trevor does not realize what is about to happen to him next. And Trevor's kind of like, what do you mean by that? Now remember, currently Trevor is being possessed by Asmodee, but he still has some kind of free will. But you have Asmodee say, listen, Trevor, I used you like I wanted to, but now you're basically useless for me, which means I have to move on, and I'm trying to bond myself to Henry, because with the powers that Henry is going to have, and then my powers as well, he'll become a very strong person to take out the different targets across the world, especially one target, Steve Rogers. Now, when it comes to Trevor, he begins to freak out. And the reason why? Because he knows what happens to somebody when you have Asmodee leave their body. Well, they turn to ash. And so he is begging Asmodee, the Lord of Chaos, to not leave his body. He wants to live. But unfortunately, he has to move on. And so he does. He leaves the body of Trevor, who then turns into ash, and you then have the Lord of Chaos bond with Henry. And so now Henry is going to have demonic powers, magic powers, and also powers of science to basically use against Steve Rogers. But getting back over to the present day, we see Steve Rogers leaving the crime scene where we saw the dead body at the very beginning of this chapter. Now, after Misty Knight leaves with the Doctor Strange doll, well, that is the moment where you have Steve be confronted by, well, Henry. And of course, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video on one heck of a cliffhanger, where you have Steve Rogers getting ready to fight against Henry, who now has the Lord of Chaos attached to his body. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's comic book video. And if you did, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.